And how we're doing, Misha, we're
Hi.
all of us a little out of our minds, I think, because we're tuned to what's going down in our nation.
13 more days.
Yeah.
Exactly. Long days, right, Susan? Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yes. Yeah, we're just this is a good moment to just kind of let it out a little bit on this insanity. Those of you who are just joining, we were just Audrey was talking and Susan Berger was talking and we're just kind of saying some type of what the fuck, I guess.
Ooh. Sometimes that's about all you can say. Yeah.
Well, there's more.
Did we just click onto a synagogue?
A certain type.
Very
And
rabbinic.
we are recording.
And we're recorded. I love
And
it.
we're recording. Welcome, everyone.
Yay.
Welcome.
Hi.
We felt right at home right away.
Yes. You built this home.
Yeah, if you don't, who would, right?
Right. Hey, Pam. Hey, Linda. Hi, Peter. Hi, Avi.
Hi,
Hey.
Misha.
Hi, Danielle.
Hello.
And,
Hi. Hey, Andy.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Susan and Michael
And Susan.
and another
Susan
guy, and Judy.
and Pam is there too.
Pam's got-
I'm here, Ellen.
And Suzanne.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
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 So good to see you.
Ditto.
And Natalie, hi. Hi. Who am I missing? Maya Wexler's, hello. Patricia, hello.
Hello.
Hi, Nancy. Hi. And then some people whose faces I don't see. Well, great to see you all. Hi, Charles. I don't know if maybe I skipped. Nice to see you all. I don't know. It's crazy times, and Jim and I were talking just an hour ago about a variety of things that have to do with tonight. There's a whole bunch of different things that we can kind of say, but I think that the first thing I'll say, which is I guess the last thing that Jim and I came to, was I think our main question, which Audrey started answering before most of you showed up, is what do the events of the last couple days have to do with this book, and vice versa. I think that's big on my mind, and possibly more important than anything in particular in the book. Although I think we're going to do a bit of both tonight. I hope we'll do a bit of both. But I guess what I'm trying to say is one of the things I appreciated about the book is it's all examples, like a whole mosaic of examples of conversations and moments and monuments and in Germany and in Mississippi and in here and in there and all over the place. So what's better than this example that we had of
Basically, this example, Misha, is so close to what happened in 1933 in Germany, right? And Susan writes about that, the sense that it can all just go, and we've been feeling that, each of us in different ways. And it's only intensified into this moment. And then already enough time has passed since last night that we can realize it's not over. It's still happening. So the proximity of Weimar Germany is upon us, and Susan's living in some deep sense in the heart of it. You know, she would have flown back. I've been in touch with her with some regularity. She would have flown back to go to Georgia, her home state, to Atlanta, to knock on doors, but that wasn't going to happen. So she was just sending whatever money she had to responses from, requests from Warnock and Ossoff. And the fact that they won is, to her an expression. I know her well. She's a madwoman in her own wonderful way. The reason she has a rabbi, me, is because she's obsessed with providence, hashgacha, providence. So she's living these moments with an intensity that is enhanced by her own religious proclivity, which she can't help herself with. I try to calm her down. So the movement is beyond our ability to tally, obviously, but we're all here knowing that. And Misha, I think you're right I know you're right. We can't enter Susan's reflections about what we Americans might learn from the Germans, which itself is, me and you were talking about what this book means to us, and what we get out of it, which is, I think, a good question for each of us. A few of you, Charles and Peter and I think Maya, maybe a few others wrote highlighted some phrases from the book that struck you, which I think we should all take a chance to look at tonight, But Misha, if I were to ask you, as an Israeli American rabbi, in the first stages of your work with this amazing synagogue, the New Shul, nothing like it in America, to the best of my knowledge, nothing. Okay, there are things that are sort of like it, like we're not all alone. And you're here now, suddenly thrust into the center of it at a wild moment. What would you say is, and you've read this book, and what in it has captured your imagination, or bothered you, or freaked you out, or what in it sang to you? And I'm asking everybody. I'm just using Misha as an opener, as he'll use me, and then we should pass off to each other and listen to one another. But what got you?
Right. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, and before I do answer, I'll just echo that last sentiment Jim said. We really do want to hear from people tonight, and we're actually going to be using a tool that we didn't use last time, which is breakout rooms, in which we'll kind of split up and have smaller conversations for a smaller piece of this conversation. So that's one thing that I want to say. And Maya gave me the wise suggestion to invite people.
You just went silent.
He froze.
I know. My internet is being weird. I'll give it one more shot, and otherwise I'll switch. I'll leave you guys to talk for a minute and switch. Maybe this will keep going. But so Maya gave me the good suggestion to invite people to speak from their personal experience. That there's people every one of us has personal experiences that have to do with this book, and that have to do with these all the things that are coming up in the last couple of days. So I'm gonna, I guess Jim, I'll try and answer your question. I'll try and model that a little bit and answer a little bit from my own kind of personal place that I actually already heard echoed earlier when Audrey was talking. But so if I think of one moment in my childhood that is pertinent to this book, I'm currently in the part reading through the part of the book where she's talking about the AFD. I'm not even sure how it's pronounced, but the kind of neo-Nazi
Right-wing party. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's pronounced either. She writes it as
So-
sort of AFG.
So when I was I think
How do you pronounce it?
when I
Somebody got a proper pronunciation there you want to toss out so that we can do it appropriately?
Oh.
Charles, somebody?
sorry, I just muted Ellen and Danielle because I thought they were chatting.
Sorry.
But they were-
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You guys can unmute and tell us if you figured it out. Anyways, I'll keep going. We'll get back to that. In any case, when I was about 15 years old, there was a horrible massacre in the city of Hebron in Palestine, in which a doctor from Brooklyn, you guys probably know this, but I'll just kind of repeat. A doctor from Brooklyn, Orthodox doctor by the name of Baruch Goldstein, on Purim Day went into the tomb of the tomb of the patriarchs, where all of the patriarchs are buried when it's usually a mosque, usually acts as a mosque, and he just went in there with a rifle and killed as many people as he could, which I think ended up being 31 people. And what I remember, other than the shock, right? I kind of went back to this moment for some reason after yesterday, even though it's such a different thing. Although, if we're in the land of symbols, which we are, I think, this thing happened in the Capitol. On the cover of the book, there's there's a Confederate soldier. There's maybe no greater symbol in Israel and Palestine, and possibly for any monotheistic anybody anywhere, than where it all began. This tomb of the tomb of the patriarch, where the patriarchs and the matriarchs are said to be buried. So that happened, and I was in shock. We were all kind of in shock. And what I remember is more than the thing itself, what I remember is the conversations at school the following day. 10th grade. I remember even the classroom. I can remember it very clearly. And I remember the kid named Moti, who spoke very clearly in support of not exactly in support, kind of the way Trump's talking about these what happened yesterday, maybe it was too much, but conceptually, it's totally right on, basically. And this is in Jerusalem, which is essentially a pretty right-wing city. But this was in a school of the conservative and reform movements. That's to the liberal side a little bit. So most of us were horrified, like the whole country, and condemned and all of that. But there was this voice that I remember, and there were other voices who were more complex than just like, this is completely wrong. That were, more to the right and could understand the sense of like, wanting revenge and things like that. But that's the main thing that I retained. To this day from that event is this kid Moti speaking like that. And
How'd you feel? How'd you feel when you heard that, Misha? What did it feel like?
I guess it was like a moment. Some people have been speaking about this moment yesterday as a moment in which things that were that you could pretend don't exist or pretend are hidden are no longer hidden, or you can't pretend anymore that they're not there. That was what I remember feeling. Like, there's that, all masks are off. It's this exists. This guy, that's the other thing, which I learned from you, Jim, or I learned to be able to say is this guy is part of me. I have that. I have that. I have that. In other words, all of these voices exist within us, which is crazy. I'm not sure that's what I was thinking at the time, but the fact that this was a part of my society that I was living in, the son of this peace activist, and all these, all this stuff, all the whatever. They're growing up in the liberal environment of, so it was a moment of like just seeing it very clearly, and seeing that it's not out there. It's not out there. It's right here. It's right here. It exists.
But when you feel that, you feel dizzy and nauseous, don't you? At least I do.
Yeah, you kind of don't know what to do. You kind of don't know what to do with.
Right. But it's a moment of shameful exposure. It's a moment of humiliation and recognition that you're not who you feel you should be. It's a terrible moment.
And also just a moment of speechlessness.
Yeah.
What do you say to that? What are you going to go and try and convince the guy? I mean, what? So we did. So there were people in the class who like responded, and maybe me too. I don't remember really. Probably the teacher responded, but yeah. I mean, that was what 28 years ago, I think. That's like
That's right. It was a while ago. Yeah. It's one of those moments. So, Misha, how you want to proceed tonight. There are people that have sent us citations that struck them deeply. I remember some of them, Peter's, who I'm looking at now, and I think Charles, you also wrote, and you have some thoughts about sending people off to begin the conversation in light of what's happening in our country and what they've absorbed in this context over the last few weeks from reading Susan. Do you want to send people off to?
And I would say, like, let's talk about the book, but let's kind of keep, not that we really need to, not that this is hard. Let's just keep in mind yesterday and the day before yesterday, or the night before yesterday. There's yeah, and just some kind of simple things I think that we can also keep in mind that are reflected in the book that came up all of a sudden. For example, the fact that a Confederate flag was unfurled on the steps of the Capitol. And for me, Audrey, I can't remember if you were. I think Audrey, you mentioned like the difference between the way these guys were. You want to say what you said at the beginning, Audrey?
Yes, like to me, one of the striking points about yesterday is during Black Lives Matter, how they used tear gas and every possible thing, and had so much military out there. And then yesterday for white people who were storming the Capitol, who were not peaceful, who were not doing a peaceful march, nothing happened. Hardly anybody even got arrested. Nobody got, they took pictures with them.
Wow.
It just was very striking to me. As you said, Misha, like before this, maybe a little, before we start with the whole Black Lives Matter discussions that we've been doing for a while at the shul, I could sort of take a look and say, oh, we've made so much progress. We've made so much progress. And then you see something like this and you see, yes, we have, and I want to acknowledge the Georgia election, a Black man in the South getting to be a senator. That's
A
amazing.
black preacher.
My friend said that's one of the things in the South, religion is really, really important. So being a preacher did help. But to see this, to say the white privilege again, that if you're white and you do things, it's just like looked aside. If you're Black, you're in prison for smoking marijuana for the rest of your life. This is another example of how Blacks are not treated the same as whites. And I think we have to see that yesterday and acknowledge that this is just, they're second-class citizens. They've been second-class citizens. We've never, as to tie into the book, we've never said slavery, we're sorry for it, and done some kind of reparations. We don't even want to have the bill that says we should look into the issue. And most people think, oh, it's in the past, it's in the past. Well, at least most white people think that. Black people don't think that. And it's not in the past, it's in the present. This was a very clear example. It made me heartsick among every other thing that was going on, that the discrepancy between so recently what happened when Black Lives Matter people were marching peacefully, and what happened yesterday when people were trying to take over the government and do a coup. It's dramatic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Audrey. I just want to add one other piece of the same ilk that has to do with yesterday, which is that I think it was yesterday morning, and some of you may know, so you can correct me. It was either yesterday morning or the day before that the prosecutor, the DA in Kenosha, announced that they're not going to press charges on any of these officers, including the one who shot. And I feel bad, but I can't remember the name of the gentleman that was killed. The man that was killed.
Jacob Blake.
Thank you very much, Jacob.
Thank
Blake.
you.
Thank you. So, and I don't know if you guys caught this, but I had a moment of contemplation about progress and, what you're talking about, Audrey. We're making progress, we're not making progress. When he presented his this fact that they're not going to press charges, he said an interesting thing. He said, I feel completely ill-equipped to be doing any of this, really, which I understood to mean I'm not a Black person. I don't know anything about being a Black person. I'm just out of my league here. Which I thought, a few months ago, the DAs did not present the fact that they're not pressing charges with those types of words, progress. And then my next thought was like, who cares about that kind of progress? I don't. I mean, it's completely meaningless progress if your next sentence is, I'm not pressing charges. We're not pressing any charges. So, yeah. So I'm just kind of, I guess, sharing some of the inner landscape that I got going on around the connection between all of it.
So, one hopes it's one step forward and two steps back, but there's still some forward movement. But progress is an American myth that we are addicted to. And the notion is that we're going to have to come to, I think, is that we got to do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because it's moving in the right direction, not because of Martin Luther King's The Arc of History, bends towards justice. You hope it does, but you do it because it's the right thing to do. And I'm not there yet. I mean, I want to think that I'm adding incrementally. I want to believe in tikkun olam. It's a Jewish cliche, right? We Jews, we believe we're improving the world. Maybe what we're doing is just trying to keep it from getting worse. And maybe we're not doing so well at that. But even if you're not improving or even keeping it from getting worse, there's still a case to be made for doing what we have to do. And that seems to be part of what the book is about. Susan does have I think sometimes a rigid sense of what justice is and what morality requires. And, from her severe enlightenment inflected, she's obsessed, as you've seen, if you've read it through, with the enlightenment, the enlightenment. That quotation, Peter, that you cited about reason, that we shouldn't abandon reason just because reason, the Nuremberg laws were framed reasonably, So it doesn't mean you abandon reason as an enemy. It just means you realize that reason isn't enough. In the end, it's going to have something to do with a good heart. But Misha, I know you want to send us off to do some work in our rooms and to give people a chance to hear from each other. And it may not happen in the plenary session that we have now. You and I are dominating it. Audrey spoke to it really importantly, and others here have many words to share. How do you want to do that?
So here's what I'm gonna suggest. Personally, I would like the majority of this evening to be all of us together, but I think it'll be a nice opportunity to be in smaller groups for 15 minutes or so. So what I'm going to suggest is that we split up into the groups. I'm going to send, there's going to be four breakout rooms, assuming Susan and Jonathan can perform this. Oh, they got it.
Susan
Great.
indicates she can do it.
Okay, great. So does Jonathan, who's right next to her.
That's great, Jonathan.
We're gonna have four breakout rooms, and you guys, if you guys haven't seen the breakout room thing, it's pretty straightforward. A box will pop up and say you're going to this room. Just click on it, and it takes you there. And I've asked Claire and Maya, as well as Jim and me, to each kind of start the discussion in these groups. I'm going to send each one of you a quote or two. By each one of you, meaning Claire, Jim, and Maya, I'm going to send each one of you a quote or two that people have sent me in the last couple days, and you can use that to kind of contemplate. Or if you guys just want to take it from where we are, like just use the question, what's the connection between the last couple of days in the book? Feel free to do that. So Jonathan, Susan, whenever you guys are ready, let's try and make this happen.
Give us just a minute. Jonathan's assigning the four facilitators to different rooms, so you don't all end up in the same room. Everyone else will be randomly scrambled into the different rooms. So
Misha,
just-
where
Terrific,
are you
Susan.
sending the quote, the passage? Where are you putting that?
I'll put it in the chat, I think.
Misha, we're assigning Claire, Maya, yourself, and Jim.
Yeah, right, exactly. We're the kind of four moderators.
Be
Yeah.
with you though, because
Great.
we have one.
No, Eddie.
We have
Of course,
one.
one more minute.
Oh, right.
My dear friends.
Okay. Everyone else is going to be joining us. We have like 45 seconds. It's just as us still. Sorry. So I said I didn't know how to use this quite yet. Okay.
We were all following orders and they didn't.
I know. Here they come.
Susan runs a tight ship, so we had to kind of set the example.
Against the clock. Best thing, what he's gonna say.
Exactly.
Seconds.
What kind of people are participating with this UGA webinar you were talking about? Is it all synagogues or other religious groups?
It was synagogues.
Synagogues. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were one of, there were over 100 applications and we were one of 19 synagogues that were chosen to get a grant. And then as the requirement of the grant was that spiritual leadership and other lay leaders and executive leadership were invited to participate in a 3-session webinar training. Kind of spanned a lot of different mechanisms for having conversations.
Was it valuable?
It was, yeah. Like certain parts of it were incredibly valuable, others less so, but yeah, in general. And it's always, I think, just amazingly useful to connect with others. You know, so we were talking at the end of today about just regardless of scale or scope of project, we're all confronting a lot of the similar issues. So sharing best principles can be really helpful, and just knowing each other.
Just to riff off of the UJA thing that we did today, there's in the UJA thing, there was one thing that was often very annoying, and people started complaining about it, which was that we would do breakout rooms, and then every breakout room had to give a little report on what happened in the breakout room. And usually it was kind of annoying. So my technique is going to be slightly different, and that's this. Was there in your breakout room something that was really interesting? If there wasn't, please don't share it. And if there was, I don't know, what was interesting to talk about?
I don't see our group.
Is everybody here? The whole, we all merged?
I think we're all back,
I'm
right?
Yes,
here.
we're
I
all
think we're
back.
here.
Yeah.
We're all back.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
But do it, Ellen.
What do you want me to
What
say?
struck you? What, I don't know what I want you to say.
I mean, everything was so rich in our conversation. We went pretty deep from Susan's talk of a circle of healing, wounding and healing with regard to her family in Germany. And I mean, everybody shared such powerful stuff. I don't even know what to say. Jim, do you want to?
No, I feel pretty much like you do. I think we saw, to our surprise, Daniel gave us a sense of hope. Susan went into the horror of her personal family experience. And the next thing I knew, so I'm feeling the pain, she's describing these amazing healing events that have occurred in Germany, which then left Audrey wondering, well, can they happen here in America today? And we got, all of us, except Susan, we all said, we kind of know people that are deep inside of the Trump side of the equation. They're probably deeply wounded now and enraged. And Ellen, you were so beautiful talking about your love for such a person and how, and then Michael gave this, no, who was it? Michael said it as well. Two people said it. Michael, somebody else said, your friend said, where was it a therapist, Ellen? Where there is rage.
Oh, Baldwin.
James, cite the Baldwin, Ellen.
I don't have it exact, so forgive me. But I just heard this morning a quote, something about where there is this incredible rage, and I think he was speaking about racist bigots, the group that he is not so forgiving of. He said, but where there's that, inexplicable rage, it's because there's an inability to access the pain that's underneath it.
And then Michael underscored that. Michael, how did you say it?
There is no rage without grief. The rage, we live in loss and we experience grief at the level that we can bear it. And to protect that place, we lash out and we experience rage and try to cover it and try to, as it were, in a certain way, protect it by defending it aggressively with rage.
So that's an insight into what our country is about today, and what we who are not experiencing, well, we probably are experiencing rage, each of us in our own way, actually. But that rage, to recognize it first in ourselves, but then in others with whom we feel radical dissent, is coming from a pain, a grief, a deep sorrow, a deep sense of grievance. I think that's what we were moving to in our group, yeah.
The conversation, hopefully, in whatever way possible, will be to try to get to what is the source of the pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know if the etymology is the same, but it struck me in what you were saying now, Jim. Grief, grievance, they seem related words, even though I think the etymology might be different. But interesting that you use them side by side.
Can I ask a question? Were you assigning the Baldwin quote to the people who were raging outside the Capitol? Did I get that right?
Well, I have to say, maybe this is through my, crazy lens. I heard it on Morning Joe this morning. I think it was Eddie Glaude Jr., who's, a Baldwin specialist, wrote a whole book on him. But it was a quote somewhere. I think it was Baldwin talking about trying himself to understand the oppressive racist group that was having such, rage and grievance against the minority group, the African Americans, trying to understand what that horrible, what thing coming at him was. And that it was a rage, but that it was hiding a grief that could not be expressed. I think it was Baldwin trying himself to understand what we try to understand when we look at the red-faced crowds coming through the mobs.
Maya, do you think that's wrong?
No, I think it's very magnanimous of him to try to understand.
Well, it's shocking
what's coming at him like that, because I didn't have such feelings toward those people I saw yesterday.
Well, but I think Baldwin was trying to, I think he understood that he needed to understand.
I get that, if that's in fact what that quote is. I'm sorry, I don't know, but it's very likely.
You know what? I'm going to go back and research it. I'll come back.
Send it around to all of us. It's if you can find the source, that would be very important for us to look at. Baldwin was a gigantic prophet. He wasn't simply an angry man. He actually loved America and loved white people. I don't know how that was possible, and it's astounding. Obama may have some of that in him as well, and it's astounding.
Yeah.
And Jews, I heard it from Susan tonight. Jews are capable of it, but it's very, very hard and that's what Susan's book is about, isn't it, Misha? It's about learn from the Germans. Michael said it so well. What are we supposed to learn from them? And who's supposed to learn it from them? And it's connected to Maya's beautiful, honest statement about looking at these monsters, this half-naked guy with bull horns coming out. I mean, that image it's the barbarians at the gate. But we can't just stop there, is the point. If we want the republic to go on, if we want the American dream not simply to vanish, we got to go further. And we Jews have a stake in that, I suspect. Don't you think so, Misha? As an Israeli Jew, we have, it's like Israel is in some ways the 51st state,
Yeah. I do. I think what I gotta say, one thing that's striking me right now, and I'll just say it quickly, and then kind of pass on the torch here, because I think there's other people who maybe want to say something. But one thing that I'm struck with right now is that we're a bunch of Jews who are gathered to talk about, learning from the Germans and what happened yesterday, and we're maybe informed by the Holocaust, but I don't feel the Holocaust here as a Jewish oppression, front and center. I'm saying, we're here talking about the relations primarily between white people and African Americans. So I just want to kind of, I guess, call it.
I wanted to build a little bit off of what the other group talked about and just say that our group also spent a lot of time thinking and talking about different like psychological and also like systems forces that may have motivated the people who like wreaked havoc and destruction the way that they did yesterday. And if anyone from my group wanted to share more about what we talked about in that respect, I would invite you to do so. And before that, I would also add my own addendum or thought to it, which is that I think it's kind of interesting that two of our groups focused a little bit on that topic, considering the primacy of the Wehrmacht exhibit that Neiman goes over, because I think that to a degree, the example of that piece of the history on the German side goes to show that at a certain point, there were forces that said we basically don't care what your motivations for feeling this way are. Your version of history is wrong. Your version of history is wrong. And the one that's correct is the one where you don't get to cry wolf. The one that's correct is where your forebears committed crimes and were part of evil. And so I don't know. I guess I feel a little bit uncomfortable with coming up with all these really complicated ways of describing the motivations. That's it.
You put evil on the table, Claire, which I don't think we're going to be able to deal with sufficiently tonight, but I think it's a terribly, terribly important question of what it is we mean by evil and how we live with it, how we oppose it, and how very important question. And thank you for putting it out.
Can I say something? Yeah. Hello. I lived in Germany I lived in Berlin for a year. I worked there in 1968, which was still the time post-war. And in fact, all my friends were the sons and daughters of people who were adults during the war. And they were extremely they knew I was Jewish, and they were very pro-Jewish, the sons and daughters, all my friends, and quite anti-Arab. In those days, we're talking about 68, and we're not far from, it was just the war before, there was a war just a year before with Israel. And anyway, the times were, and they were I remember, and I was living in some kind of students' dorm, and there were a lot of Arab students there as well. So we often had meetings, and they were always interacting with the Germans, the young German students and the Arabs. And there was this major discussion. I remained silent essentially because I didn't need somebody to talk about for pro-Israel. But the reason I'm saying that is that in those days, they never talked about their parents, these Germans, and I never asked them. I didn't feel it was appropriate, even though I was very close to them. I never asked them. about what the parents did during the war. I have no idea. And I felt very sorry for them, I have to say, because I felt very sorry. Their parents might have some kind of, probably some of them at least had some dark history during the war. And how would they live with that? So, but anyway, what I want to say, at that time, it was silence about the war. And at the time, there was nothing really, there were a lot of pro-Jewish thing among the younger generation, but not much more. Then the Germans government went into reparations, went into, they started really being very, very active. So now comparing with the South and the slavery, there is a difference, and that's why I find it a little difficult to try and see what we can learn from the Germans. The Germans still had a live connection to their parents, grandparents who had lived during the war, so that it was very close and close to them. Whereas in this case, slavery ended in 1865, and so it's not close to the people here. So here we're talking about racism, which was induced by slavery, but slavery is now 150 years old. And people don't have that connection that the Germans had to the Holocaust. It's really a different connection. I think we have to recognize that. So that's why I think it's, the question is, what can we learn from the Germans? It's a very good question, and I'll have to think more about it. But I just want to pose that there is, it's not quite the identical situation.
So Danielle, can I very respectfully disagree completely?
Who's talking? Who's
Ed.
this? Oh, Ed. Hello, Ed.
It's Ed. Hi. Because it's, you know, slavery ended in 1865, and the age of terror began in 1877 and went on until today. It hasn't ended. And it's not just the South, it's this whole country. You know, there's white privilege everywhere, the systemic discrimination and the systemic racism everywhere, the North, the South. The South are much more active about it. One of the things I found really interesting in Susan's book is she talks about when all these thousands of monuments, which you would never find in Germany to, you know, there's no monument to Hitler, there's no monuments to Goebbels, but there are monuments all over the South to these traitorous soldiers and generals and everybody. They were built at two different times. In the late 1800s, at the time of the complete disenfranchisement of Blacks in the South, and you know, the really ramping up of that age of terror down there. And in the 1960s, when the Civil Rights Act was passed and the Voting Rights Act was passed, those were like really violent and vigorous efforts to fight back against any concept of equality and any concept of ending the systemic discrimination against Black people in this country. And we're still fighting that now. I mean, it's today's problem.
And I completely agree with you, and that was not my point. My point, I completely agree that it still exists, but what exists now is racism, which was induced by the slavery that happened through 1865, Jim Crow and all that. I completely agree with you, but I'm trying to compare it to Germany, where there was a sort of an unbelievable crime was committed during the war. And there was an unbelievable crime with slavery, which is and that I sort of, if you can equalize, I would say that. I say yes. But what I'm saying now is that the black people are not systematically murdered. That's really what I'm saying, and that's
really
the legacy.
Really?
Not compared to the Holocaust.
Not at one
in the
time.
Holocaust.
Come on.
Comparing to the Holocaust.
Susan Nyman says she's not comparing evil. So it's not a comparative evil. And I think she explains that really well. We don't weigh which evil is worse. We weigh what we need to do as citizens of this country who reap the benefit of that original sin, how we need to repair and face up to that and repair the wound, the deep, deep wound that will never heal.
unless white people face this. So it's not comparing whether it was worse what the Germans did to the Jews or what we did, what this country did to Black people and then profited ever since that moment, since 1690.
I think in a way,
Can I
it's
just-
about educate. Okay, go ahead.
All I'm saying is that what can we learn from the Germans? And all I'm saying is let's be caution because it's not quite the same. I'm not making comparison which is worse or what. I'm saying it's different. And that's really what I'm saying. And what can we learn from the Germans? We have to be aware that it's a little different.
In a sense,
Danielle, I take what you're saying to be that the immediacy of it, in a way, the blood was still wet on the hands of the perpetrators.
That's right.
And that is, I would say, less of a challenge than what we face, which is, you know, the repercussions of it are as vibrant and overt as ever. But to get to track to trace the lineage to original committers of the sin and our roles in perpetuating and keeping that sin alive is a different challenge of whatever that 20-syllable word about the past is. You know, that's what I took what you were saying to me.
May I pose a possibility though? I would pose the possibility that drawing that line of connection is difficult for white people in this country to do and not so difficult for Black people in this country to do.
Agree.
Of course. But, you know, white people need to own this. And
Well,
that's
exactly, which has to do with acknowledging the fact that that line of connection really isn't particularly, it is like quite easy to draw.
It
And that
is,
the
but
ills-
we need to be educated. It's like when Black Lives Matter, I've been involved in civil rights stuff since I was a student. I marched, I connected, I did stuff. I, you know, I thought really sensitized and knowledgeable. But when Black Lives Matter happened, I went back and I went down the whole of reading into the particulars, and I was shocked at the line from slavery through, you know, Reconstruction, through Jim Crow, through everything. I started linking it all together, you know, and also the, what is it, the 16 something project, you know, all this stuff that I read, I was shocked at how unknowledgeable I was. You know, we didn't live it. And, you know, my privilege blinded me. I just wasn't educated. I think that what Danielle was saying is that when it's your parents and you see your, you know, pictures on the piano of your father in a brown shirt, you know, it's a little bit harder to ignore the immediate culpability. I think
I
that's
think
really.
though that maybe it would be easy for our community to draw the line of connection in the case of what happened in Germany because we identify as Jews. But similarly, like bringing back again the example of the Wehrmacht exhibit, even folks who are only a generation removed or less were not able to draw the connection between what their families had done and the idea of like injustice or evil or violence. And it required some different mode of education and some different mode of processing history, which is what you're speaking about, Ellen, in order for the broader German community, inclusive of the people who committed those crimes, to acknowledge it as such. So I think that there are more parallels, I guess.
I mean, education is really important.
In some ways also, I think it's more difficult to own the identity of a perpetrator of a crime, of the cruelty of the people who perpetrate. It's much harder to do that than in some ways to say, yeah, I was victim, you know. I think it takes in some ways a lot more courage and a lot more, it's so much more complex to say, this is my people who have done this, who can do this. And, you know, my father, who's a Holocaust, he said, no Jew ever sought revenge. Really?
Not really.
It can't be true. You know, like, really? Want to believe these things, just like, you know, the myths that have so galvanized people and solidified in these monuments and these actions, you know, and that's the hard part, the shame and the guilt and the identifying with the cruel part of one's one's nationality, one's group, mankind, and what we said before, it's in all of us in some form, you know. But I really admire those people, the Germans that I've known, who have tried to work at this in their way by, you know, knowing their history, really knowing it. And like Ellen, there were things, and I've done a lot of things, you know, throughout my adult life in some ways, and I've identified with Black oppression in some ways, but it's not the same. You know, I can walk the streets in a different way, but I still was shocked in learning things that I've been learning more and more recently. The conversation that's we've been having is on such a different level than 50 years ago. I mean, thank God. And, but so much more to learn, really, and work through for ourselves, and coming up with something that's truly meaningful in the long run and sustainable, because what we're living with is not sustainable, as the Trump era has shown.
Misha, do you still, Susan, that was incredible, the dimensions of what you've said. Misha, do you still hold, we spoke earlier, with that sense that Susan, in her book, quoting this man Todorov, the Bulgarian French-speaking and writing intellectual, said about the way Jews ought to think about and Germans ought to think about the Holocaust, which probably has implications I can't draw myself, maybe you can, for how we Jewish Americans ought to think about ourselves in relationship to what happened, as Daniel said, and as Ed challenged him 150 years ago. In the spirit of, go ahead.
Let me read it. Let me read this piece that kind of, I think, thing about what we're talking about. On page 28, she says, "Do my best to follow Tsevetan Todorov's wise injunction. Germans should talk about the singularity of the Holocaust. Jews should talk about its universality."
Say it again, please.
Germans should talk about the singularity of the Holocaust. Jews should talk about its universality. This is a variation on an idea we should have learned in kindergarten. If everyone cleans up their own mess, we won't have to worry about anyone else's.
That's the quote I really wanted to send.
Oh, that's the one. I thought that may be the one you were talking about, Peter.
Peter.
Wow.
Then she says this: "A German who talks about the singularity of the Holocaust is taking responsibility. A German who talks of its universality is denying it. Germans insisting on universality are seeking exoneration. If everyone commits mass murder one way or another, how could they help doing it too?"
Wow.
And then a few lines later, she says, "A Jew who insists on what Todorov called the universality of the Holocaust need not argue for exact equivalence between the Holocaust and the crimes of other nations. It's a matter of taking responsibility for the latter."
Wow. Wow.
Great quote.
That pretty much nails it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, Misha, I think that to say anything after that would be anticlimactic. We could, of course, we could go on indefinitely, but that might be a wrap. What do you think?
Wow. Can you send that quote to all of us?
Happily. Yeah. Yeah. This, sorry. It's to me, it like the ballsiness of this book is captured in the ability to say that. You know, for us Jews to say we need to think of the Holocaust as a universally. That is like, that tells me that there's something happening generationally. That a Jewish person, and that is registered, so obviously true to me. That's a ballsy statement, because Jews have been working on exactly the opposite of that primarily. I mean, saying Jews is of course I'm making but that's certainly what the state of Israel has taught me.
Wow. Rabbi, where did you get that statement from?
Page 28.
Okay.
Page 28, towards the bottom. It's the third paragraph.
If it's universal, then we're capable of it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And I think maybe that's where Baldwin was trying to go, if I understood the quote correctly.
Mm.
All right. I'm gonna take my rabbi's lead and call it a night. This is what I want to say actually before we go. So we have this meeting with Susan in what is it, like 10 days or something like that, right? I think it's whatever, a week from Sunday, which I think is like at 11 or 12 o'clock. So because she's in Germany, so it had to be earlier in the day. Invite people to this. But the other thing I want to suggest is I've read through. I was telling them the breakout room. I've read through a bunch of this book, not all of it, but several chapters from kind of different parts of the book. For my money, the heart of the book is the chapter about Mississippi.
The only one I read.
It's like, I forget, chapter 3, thank you. Everybody knows about Mississippi, it's called. Yeah, I brought it up in the breakout room because we found ourselves talking about healing and how does one get anywhere near healing. And that's what the book is. She says this isn't about comparing evils, it's about comparing redemption and strategies towards redemption. So it's an interesting piece. There's a lot to talk about there. But that's what I'm going to suggest, that like if you have to choose one, if you can only get through one more chapter of this book, make it that one. And otherwise, there's interesting stuff all over the place in this book. So read the whole thing or read whichever parts you want. But I think that one's a good nugget. That one's important. And you know what I want to say actually is maybe we should pray for a second for this place we live in. So maybe let's just kind of take a breath. Let's remember that there's goodness and nastiness in this country, like there is in every country. And let's pray that goodness manifests, and that we are on a path, and that path is the path that we need to be on. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שהכל נהיה בדברו. Blessed are you, Adonai, ruler of the universe, who brings about everything.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So thank you all. We got a Shabbat service tomorrow night. That'll be nice.
What time?
6 o'clock, 6 p.m. That'll be nice. We got this amazing drummer.
Look forward to seeing you.
All of you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
Really.
Bye.
Bye.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, they did last time. See.
Night to
Hi,
her.
Mom.
I think she left. Secretary leave.
Same people who ended last time. Tough. There we go.
You're muted. I have a lot to say about it.
Oh, okay.
Hi, guys.
Erica,
Let me see your pretty face, Erica.
I sent you a WhatsApp
Oh, I don't have my phone with me.
when you get it. The meantime, Misha, I wonder if we belong in your group. I don't want
Who
to
said
talk
that?
because it's your congregation and they have to express themselves. So I think I'm a foreigner.
Always a foreigner, Robbie.
נכון.
Such a deep part of
No,
your
he's not a
identity.
foreigner, he's a refugee.
But you spoke, that's why we did the breakout rooms, was like so that you could so that everybody could, it's intimidating that with the big group. But you spoke in the little group and that was great.
No, I think the
She
point
did,
was,
she did.
the little group, I felt it was okay, but we didn't want to take space from your participants.
Please
Don't
Right.
be polite. You have to talk to your people.
La, I know, but you guys are there, and I want you to be there. Like, please express yourselves and targishu babayit, mikasa sukasa.
You've been with my dad when he's at home in his house?
It's great. It's great. I take it. I signed up for it. What can I say?
Good. She's very interesting, this woman. The book has a lot in it.
It's really kind of
That's
almost
what
too
I
much.
read, yeah. Really a lot.
I have a confession to you, Misha. I don't pray, right? And I don't believe in everything else. But whenever I make a wish,